The afternoon light, strained through the polished glass of the cafe, had the quality of old money. Thin, clear, and casting no real warmth. Anya Sharma felt the weight of it on her shoulders as she signed the check, her pen a black slash against the creamy paper. She was late. She was always late. It was the nature of her world, a perpetual state of catching up to a future she herself was meant to be creating. She gathered her briefcase, the leather cool and structured against her fingertips, a familiar anchor in a day of abstract crises. Leo Vance watched her from his small table near the window. He was not watching her, precisely, but observing the patterns of movement in the cafe, the hurried impatience of the business lunches, the languid grace of the tourists, the focused energy of the baristas. His daughter Maya sat opposite him, her small fingers carefully arranging sugar packets into a fortress around her cup of hot chocolate. He had learned to read spaces and people the way he once read code, looking for the underlying architecture, the stresses, the load-bearing assumptions. The woman in the severe grey suit was a skyscraper of intention, all vertical lines and hard angles. As she turned to leave, a slim, dark wallet slipped from the unlatched outer pocket of her briefcase. It fell without a sound, landing flat on the plush runner by the door like a shed leaf. The woman took 2 steps, then 3, her mind already in the black car waiting outside, in the boardroom waiting for her signal. She did not notice. Leo noticed. He waited a beat, expecting her to register the loss, to turn back with a flicker of annoyance. She did not. He looked at Maya, who was now looking at the wallet, her brow furrowed with the innate justice of a 7-year-old. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice a tiny bell of concern. She dropped her money. He gave a small nod, pushed his chair back, and walked over to the wallet. He picked it up. It was expensive leather, cool to the touch, and held the faint, clean scent of a high-end perfume. He turned and moved toward the door, holding the wallet out in front of him. A simple offering. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was calm, not loud, but meant to cut through the cafe's hum. Anya stopped. She did not turn at first. Her entire posture stiffened, a reflexive tightening of defences. The world was constantly asking something of her, and her first instinct was always to deny. She turned slowly, her eyes not on his face, but on the wallet in his hand. A flicker of something cold and sharp moved through her. She saw a man in a worn work shirt and faded jeans, his hands calloused. She saw the wallet that belonged to her, now in his possession. The calculation was instant, cynical, and deeply ingrained. Her security guard, a silent man named Harris, who materialized from the entryway, stepped forward. He did not touch Leo, but his presence was a physical pressure, a shift in the room's atmosphere. "My wallet," Anya said. It was not a question. Her voice was flat, chilled. She did not reach for it. Her eyes, a startlingly pale shade of blue, finally lifted to meet his. They were full of a weary, dismissive suspicion. She was cataloguing him, filing him away under a category he knew all too well. A problem, a delay, a potential threat. "You dropped it," Leo said, his voice steady. He held it out a little further. The simple truth felt strangely inadequate against the wall of her disbelief. Anya's gaze dropped back to the wallet, then to his hands. They were a carpenter's hands, clean but marked by a life of tangible work. To her, in that moment, they looked like the hands of someone who might take what was not his. She stepped forward and snatched the wallet from his hand. The movement was sharp, accusatory. She did not say thank you. She unzipped it with a brisk, angry motion, her eyes scanning the contents. He saw the flash of cards, the thick wedge of cash she kept for incidentals. He saw her shoulders relax by a fraction of an inch as she confirmed nothing was missing. The unspoken accusation hung in the air, thicker than the smell of coffee. She had expected to find it lighter. She zipped the wallet shut, her expression unchanged. She looked at him one last time, a look of pure dismissal. It was the look one gave a piece of faulty equipment or an inconvenient circumstance. It was a look that rendered him invisible, irrelevant. Then without a word, she turned and was gone, the glass door swinging shut behind her, leaving him standing in the sudden silence. Leo stood there for a long moment, the ghost of the wallet's weight in his palm. He felt the eyes of the other patrons on him, the whispers of speculation. He felt the specific humiliation of being judged and found wanting by a system he had long ago abandoned. He turned and walked back to his table. Maya was looking at him, her own hot chocolate forgotten, her eyes wide and troubled. "Why was she mad?" Maya asked. "You were helping." Leo sat down and took his daughter's small hand in his. Her fingers were warm and slightly sticky. He looked into her face, a perfect composite of his own quiet intensity and the ghost of her mother's smile. "Some people," he said softly, choosing his words like he chose pieces of wood, "have a hard time believing that something can be given back for free." He squeezed her hand, a silent promise to shield her from that kind of poverty for as long as he could. The next morning began, as it always did, with the smell of sawdust and the low hum of the planer in his workshop. The sun streamed through the high windows, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the air like tiny golden sprites. Leo's world was one of textures and truths. The honest grain of oak, the unforgiving nature of a dull blade, the simple physics of a well-made joint. He ran his hand over a piece of maple he was shaping into a tabletop. It was smooth, cool, and real. There were no hidden clauses or subroutines in wood. Maya came in, dressed for school, carrying a small lopsided birdhouse they had been working on. "Is the roof straight, Daddy?" she asked, holding it up for inspection. Leo crouched down, his large frame folding easily. He squinted at it with mock seriousness. "It is perfectly imperfect," he declared, "which is the best way for a roof to be. It has character." He tapped the small perch. "A bird will be very happy here." Her smile was the only currency he cared about. This small, ordered life was a fortress he had built with his own hands, board by board, against the chaos of his past. The workshop, the small house attached to it, the rhythm of school runs and shared meals. It was a system designed for functional dormancy, a life lived in a quiet, protected mode. He packed her lunch, a simple affair of a sandwich, an apple, and a cookie. As he did, his phone, an old non-smart model, buzzed on the counter. The screen showed a number with a San Francisco area code. A name flashed alongside it. Thorne. Leo's hand froze for a second above the lunchbox. Marcus Thorne. A name like a scar, long healed but still tender to the touch. He let the phone buzz until it fell silent. He had not spoken to Marcus in 8 years. Not since the collapse. Not since the world of algorithms and venture capital and digital ghosts had chewed him up and spat him out. He had walked away from Ethereum, the company he had co-founded, from the very architecture of the modern connected world he had helped to design. He had walked away from a fortune, from a future, and most painfully, from Anya Sharma. He looked down at the phone as if it were a snake. He had changed his number 3 times, yet somehow Marcus always found it. a periodic, unwelcome ping from a universe he no longer wished to inhabit. He deleted the call record and put the phone back on the counter. The small act, a reassertion of his chosen exile. His life was here now, in the solid, tangible world of wood and the unwavering love of his daughter. The past was just bad code, a corrupted file he had long ago chosen to delete. Miles away, in a room that was the antithesis of Leo's workshop, Anya Sharma stared at a wall of screens. The room was known as the Observatory, a sterile, climate-controlled command center at the heart of Ethereum Tower. Here there was no wood, only glass, brushed steel, and the cold blue-white light of data streams. Her authority was absolute, her competence legendary. But today, for the first time in years, she felt the icy touch of genuine fear. "Report," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. A young man, one of her top systems analysts, flinched. "No change, ma'am. The bloom is accelerating. We're seeing cascading corruption in the archival servers. It's eating the data, not deleting it, rewriting it into nonsense." The bloom. They had given it a name, as if naming the monster might somehow contain it. It was a digital cancer, metastasizing through the core of Ethereum's proprietary data structure, a system known as the Arboreal Core. It was the company's bedrock, the very thing that made their services unique. And it was dissolving into digital noise. Her team of experts, the best and brightest she could buy, were useless. They stood around the holographic display in the center of the room, pointing at shimmering lines of code, their faces pale with the specific quality of educated people encountering a problem far beyond their comprehension. Their conventional diagnostics failed. Their reboot protocols were ineffective. They were doctors trying to perform surgery on a ghost. The core logic is archaic. One of the senior architects, a man with a doctorate from Stanford, said, pushing his glasses up his nose, "It doesn't behave according to any modern principles. It's like it's organic." Anya felt a cold dread mix with a flicker of long-buried pride. Of course it was organic. That was the point. She had designed it that way, a lifetime ago. She and Leo. It was supposed to mimic the growth patterns of a forest, to be self-regulating, self-healing. But now, that same organic nature was turning against them, growing wild and malignant. "What about the original design documents?" she snapped, her patience worn to a thread. "The charter files?" Her loyal aide Chloe, a woman whose unflappable calm was a mirror of Anya's own control, stepped forward with a tablet. "That's the problem, Anya. Most of the primary architect's files were purged, on your order, 8 years ago. The words landed like stones. 8 years ago. The betrayal. The purge. She had ordered every trace of him removed from the company's history. A digital excommunication. She had wanted to erase him, not just from the company, but from her own memory. "There must be something," Anya insisted, her voice tight. "A backup, a hard copy, a reference in another file." "I've been digging," Chloe said, her fingers flying across the tablet screen. "There are whispers. Old-timers in engineering talk about him like a myth. They called him the arborist, the one who could speak the language of the core." She paused, her expression hesitant. "I found a name. It was on a tertiary cross-reference in an old HR severance file, listed as a co-inventor on the initial patent." Anya waited, her heart hammering against her ribs with a strange, unfamiliar rhythm. She knew what was coming, but she needed to hear it, to see the final bitter piece of the puzzle click into place. Chloe turned the tablet toward her. On the screen was a single name, Leo Vance. The name hung in the air, a ghost summoned from a sealed tomb. For a moment it meant nothing, a collection of sounds. Then the memories flooded back, sharp and painful. A shared office late at night, the floor littered with takeout containers and scrawled diagrams. The intellectual fire of his mind, the quiet intensity of his gaze, the way he could make complex systems feel like simple, beautiful poetry. The man she had once believed in more than anyone. The man who had broken her trust so completely. "Where is he?" Anya asked, her voice a whisper. "That's where it gets strange," Chloe said, swiping to another screen. "His digital footprint vanishes 8 years ago. No social media, no professional listings, no credit activity beyond a local bank in Northwood." She paused. "I ran a public records search, found a business license for a carpentry shop and a DMV record." Chloe brought up the DMV photo. It was grainy, poorly lit, but unmistakable. The same strong jaw, the same quiet, watchful eyes. The face of the man who had designed the system that was now her ruin. The face of the man who had stood in the cafe yesterday, holding her wallet. Anya stared at the photo, and the entire world tilted on its axis. The man from the cafe, the carpenter, the insignificant man she had dismissed with such cold contempt. He was Leo Vance, the arborist, the only person on earth who could save her. The dawning irony was so immense, so crushing, it stole the air from her lungs. She felt a wave of nausea. She had not just dismissed him, she had accused him, in her heart, of being a common thief. And now he held the keys to her entire kingdom. The past was not a corrupted file, it was a living entity, and it had just come back to claim its due. The story she had told herself for 8 years, the neat narrative of betrayal and righteous anger, suddenly felt thin and full of holes. The man in the picture did not look like a traitor. He looked quiet. He looked like a man who had found a peace she could not even comprehend. The backstory was a place Anya rarely visited. It was a locked room in the mansion of her mind, the key long since thrown away. But now, with Leo Vance's face staring out from the screen, the door was blown off its hinges. She remembered him not as a carpenter, but as a virtuoso of logic. They had met at a university hackathon, two brilliant, arrogant prodigies who saw the digital world not as a tool, but as a territory to be explored and redefined. They founded Ethereum with a third partner, Marcus Thorne. Marcus was older, a former professor of theirs, a man with the connections and the capital they lacked. He was their mentor, their champion. He saw the fire in them and gave it oxygen. Anya was the visionary, the one who saw the market, the application, the path to power. Leo was the architect, the purist. He cared only for the elegance of the system, the beauty of a perfectly balanced algorithm. Together, they built the arboreal core. It was their child, born of late nights and fierce arguments, fueled by cheap coffee and a shared, almost telepathic understanding. Their relationship was more than professional. It was a fusion of minds so intense it bordered on the romantic, though neither of them ever dared to name it. They were a binary star, orbiting a common center of gravity. Marcus watched them from a distance, his pride tinged with something else, something Anya had been too young and too focused to see. Jealousy. He had been the sun, and they were his planets, but their combined gravity was becoming a star in its own right, and he felt himself being pulled into a secondary role. He was particularly resentful of Leo, whose quiet, innate genius seemed to eclipse Marcus's own studied expertise. The betrayal, when it came, was a masterpiece of corporate sabotage. Ethereum was on the verge of a massive deal with a rival tech giant. The deal hinged on the security of the arboreal core. 2 days before the signing, a critical piece of proprietary code was leaked to a tech blog. The deal collapsed. The stock plummeted. The media descended like vultures. Marcus presented the evidence to Anya. Server logs that showed the data transfer originating from Leo's personal workstation. Encrypted emails, painstakingly decrypted by Marcus himself, that seemed to show Leo communicating with the rival company. A secret bank account in the Cayman Islands, opened in Leo's name, with a substantial deposit. It was a perfect, irrefutable case. Anya was devastated. It felt like a physical blow. The person she trusted most, the other half of her own intellect, had betrayed her for money. Her grief quickly curdled into a cold, hard rage. She confronted Leo. He denied everything, of course. He looked at her with those same steady eyes, his face pale with shock and hurt, and told her it was a lie. He told her someone was framing him. But the evidence was too strong. Marcus's evidence. She chose to believe it. It was easier to believe in a simple, greedy betrayal than in a complex and sinister conspiracy. She fired him. She activated the clause in their partnership agreement that stripped him of his shares and his intellectual property rights. She told him if he ever came near the company again, she would press charges and ruin him completely. Then she systematically purged his name, his work, his very existence from the company's records. It was a digital damnatio memoriae. What she did not know was that Marcus had fabricated everything. He had used his system administrator privileges to spoof the logs. He had used a sophisticated program to create the fake emails. He had opened the offshore account himself, using a stolen digital identity. He had leaked the code. He had not wanted the deal to go through. It would have diluted his control. He wanted Ethereum for himself, with Anya as his brilliant but manageable lead engineer. He needed to cut out the one person who was his equal, the one person Anya might listen to over him, Leo. The fallout for Leo was absolute. He was blacklisted. The story, leaked by Marcus's contacts, painted him as a disgraced tech bro. His reputation was shattered. At the same time, his wife, who had a high-risk pregnancy, went into premature labour, a complication the doctors said was exacerbated by acute stress. Sarah died on the operating table, but the doctors managed to save the baby. A girl. Maya. Leo was left with nothing but a newborn daughter and the wreckage of his life. The world of code and capital had proven to be a treacherous illusion. He took the small inheritance his wife had left him and disappeared. He moved to Northwood, a town far from the glow of Silicon Valley. He bought a small house with a large workshop. He taught himself carpentry, finding solace in the honesty of wood and the clarity of a straight line. He built a new life, a new operating system for his soul, with one core principle: Maya. He had to build a world for her that was real, that was safe, that could not be hacked or stolen. Anya, of course, knew none of this. She only knew the story she had been told, the story she had used to fuel her ambition for 8 years. The betrayal had made her ruthless, focused, and immensely successful. It had also encased her heart in ice. Now that ice was beginning to crack. The ghost she had tried to exorcise had a name, a face, and he was the only one who could save her from the monster she and he had created. Finding Leo Vance was not difficult. Approaching him was another matter entirely. Anya could not send Chloe. She could not send a lawyer. She could not send a car. This was not a transaction that could be delegated. This was a debt she had to pay in person. She drove herself to Northwood, the sleek black electric sedan, looking alien on the quiet tree-lined streets. His address led her to a modest house set back from the road, fronted by a large barn-like workshop. The sound of a saw whining rhythmically came from within. She parked the car, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She, who could command boardrooms and sway markets with a single phone call, felt a profound sense of powerlessness. She got out of the car. She had changed out of her suit into jeans and a simple cashmere sweater, a pathetic attempt to bridge the chasm between their worlds. The air smelled of cut grass and pine. It was a smell she vaguely remembered from childhood summers, a scent from a life she had long since optimized away. She walked to the open bay doors of the workshop. Leo was inside, his back to her. He was bent over a massive slab of wood, his focus absolute. He moved with an economy and grace that surprised her. It was the same intensity she remembered from when he would stare at a screen of code, but now it was directed at a physical object. Sawdust clung to his dark hair and the shoulders of his shirt. She watched him for a full minute, unseen. He was a part of this place. He fit. She was the anomaly, an invasive species in this carefully cultivated ecosystem. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Leo?" He did not startle. The saw whined down into silence. He finished his cut, his movements deliberate, then set the tool down on the workbench. Only then did he turn, slowly, to face her. His eyes held no surprise, only a deep, weary resignation. He had been expecting her. Not today, perhaps, but someday. The system he had built was too elegant not to fail in an interesting way. "Anya," he said. Her name sounded strange in his mouth, an artifact from another language. She started, but the words caught in her throat. The apology for the cafe, the carefully rehearsed opening, it all felt absurd. "The company, Ethereum, we have a problem." Leo picked up a rag and began wiping his hands, his gaze never leaving hers. "You have a problem," he corrected her gently. "Ethereum is not my company. Not for a long time." "It's the core," she said, pushing forward, falling back on the familiar language of crisis. "The arboreal core. There's a corruption, a cascade failure. We're calling it the bloom." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a sad, ironic flicker. "The bloom. Of course you gave it a name." He tossed the rag onto the bench. "It can't be fixed." "It has to be," she insisted. "We've thrown everything at it. The best people." "You have experts," he said, his voice flat. "You do not have people who understand its philosophy. The core was never just code, Anya. It was a living system, and you've been starving it of its primary nutrient for 8 years. Truth." The word landed between them, heavy and sharp. "I'll pay you," she said, the words tasting like ash. It was her default solution, the hammer she used for every nail. "Whatever you want, name your price." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "My price?" He took a step closer, and for the first time, she saw the faint lines of grief etched around his eyes. Lines that had not been there 8 years ago. "You can't afford my price, Anya. The price is a time machine. The price is my wife's life. The price is the 8 years with my daughter that I spent looking over my shoulder, wondering when the world I left behind would finally find me." His words were not angry. They were simply true, stated with the same calm finality as a law of physics. The chasm between them was not about money or a company. It was about a life that had been broken and a life that had been built on that break. "I didn't know," she whispered, the admission feeling small and pathetic. "No," he agreed. "You didn't. You didn't want to. You had your story, and it worked for you. He turned away from her, back to the slab of wood on his workbench. A clear dismissal. You should go, Anya. There's nothing for you here. The air in the workshop grew thick with the silence of their unresolved history. Anya stood frozen. The executive who always had a contingency plan, utterly without one. Desperation made her bold. It's not just a corruption, is it? She asked, her voice gaining a sliver of its old analytical edge. The bloom isn't random. It's too elegant, too deliberate. It feels like your work. Leo stopped, his hand hovering over a chisel. He turned back to her, and she saw a flicker of the old Leo, the intellectual partner, intrigued despite himself. It's not my work, he said softly, but it is a ghost in my machine. He was about to say more when a small voice cut through the tension. Daddy. Maya stood in the doorway connecting the workshop to the house. She was holding the lopsided birdhouse, and her eyes were fixed on Anya with open, unafraid curiosity. Leo's entire demeanor shifted. The hardness in his eyes softened. The tension in his shoulders eased. He was a father again. Hey, monkey, he said. I thought you were reading. I finished the chapter, she said, her gaze still on Anya. She took a tentative step into the workshop. Who's she? Before Leo could answer, Anya knelt, an instinctive gesture to make herself smaller, less threatening. My name is Anya, she said, her voice softer than she had intended. Maya walked right up to her, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked from Anya's face to the expensive car visible through the open door, then back again. Children read architecture too, and Anya's was all wrong for this place. Then Maya did something that shattered Anya's composure completely. She held out the birdhouse. This is for the birds, Maya said, a simple statement of fact. My dad says you have to make things right, not just for you, but for the things that can't speak for themselves. She was parroting something Leo had likely told her 100 times. A simple moral lesson. But in that moment, delivered by this serious little girl, it felt like a profound indictment. A judgment from a pure and incorruptible court. Anya reached out and took the birdhouse. It was light, inexpertly made, and yet it felt heavier than all the shares of her company. It was a tangible object, built with love and intention. It was real. She looked up at Leo, her eyes full of a truth she could no longer deny. The price wasn't money. The price was acknowledging the past, the whole of it. Later that week, Leo Vance walked into the Ethereum Observatory. He wore the same simple clothes, but he moved with a quiet authority that silenced the room. He was a ghost, walking through his own haunted house. He did not look at the frantic analysts or the shimmering screens. He walked straight to the central console, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He did not try to fix the bloom. He simply asked it a question, in its own native language, a language only he and Anya knew. He typed a single line of archaic code, a query string that was more like a line of poetry. The system responded. On the main screen, the chaotic, cancerous patterns of the bloom resolved for a moment into a single, elegant string of data. It was a digital signature, a routing address. It's not a corruption, Leo said, his voice echoing in the silent room. It's a transfer, a hidden subroutine. It's been siphoning off your core IP, piece by piece, and rerouting it to a shell corporation registered in Panama. He looked at Anya. This isn't a disease, Anya. It's a heist. A very slow, very patient heist. He pointed to the signature on the screen. And that's the architect. The name on the screen was not Leo's. It was Marcus Thorne. The dead man's switch he had built into the system years ago, a final greedy grab for control, had finally activated. The truth, when it was revealed, was both simple and monstrous. The quiet confrontation happened an hour later. Anya sat in her office, the phone on speaker. Leo stood by the window, looking down at the city. She had dialed Marcus's number. He picked up on the second ring, his voice smooth and avuncular. "Anya, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "It's over, Marcus," Anya said, her voice devoid of emotion. "The bloom, I know what it is. I know what you did." There was a pause, then a dry chuckle. "You can't prove a thing," he said. "I don't have to," Anya replied. "Leo's here. He found your back door." The name, dropped like a stone into a deep well, was met with profound silence. Anya continued. "The board is meeting in an hour. They will be seeing the logs, the real ones." She disconnected the call. It was finished. The hidden antagonist, the architect of her pain and Leo's exile, was exposed. The story did not end there. It began there. A week later, Anya was back at the workshop. The immediate crisis was being handled by lawyers and forensic accountants, but the real work was here. She found Leo sanding the edge of a new piece, the rhythmic scrape of the paper, a peaceful sound. Maya was at a small desk Leo had built for her, sketching in a notebook. Anya did not talk about the company. She walked over to Maya's desk. "What are you drawing?" she asked. Maya showed her the picture. It was a drawing of the workshop, with a tall stick figure for her dad, a small one for herself, and a third figure standing by the door. "Anya." "You came back," Maya said simply. Anya felt a tightness in her chest, a feeling so unfamiliar it took her a moment to identify it. It was hope. She looked over at Leo. He had stopped sanding and was watching them, a neutral expression on his face. The problem of the company was on a path to resolution, but the fragile relational dynamics between them were a new, unsolved equation. This was not an ending. It was the beginning of a quiet, difficult, and necessary chapter. The arborist had come home, not to fix the forest, but to see if anything new could be planted in the ashes of the old one.